Commander Jin was having his third cup of coffee when the universe changed forever. The Deep Space Monitoring Station orbiting Earth's moon was usually quiet during night shifts. Most signals were just background noise from distant stars or automated cargo ships reporting their positions. But this signal was different. Jin almost choked on his coffee when the computers started screaming alerts. Every screen in the control room lit up red. The signal was coming from somewhere beyond the edge of known space, and it was powerful enough to reach Earth across impossible distances. "What the hell is this?" Jin muttered, rushing to his workstation. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he tried to make sense of the data flooding his screens. The signal was encrypted, but not in any human code. The patterns were alien, complex beyond anything Earth's computers had seen before. Jin called over his partner, Lieutenant So, who was supposed to be monitoring asteroid movements. "So, you need to see this right now," Jin said, his voice shaking. Slightly. So walked over, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She had been dozing at her station, something that usually annoyed Jin, but now he was grateful for the company. "This better be good, Jin. I was having a nice dream about being back home in Seoul," So complained. Then she saw the screens. Her complaints died in her throat. The computer finally cracked part of the encryption. Words began appearing on the screen, translated into Korean and then English. The message was simple, but terrifying. To any who received this transmission, the text read, "We are the Zalarian Confederation. Our 12 worlds are dying. Ancient machines have returned from the void. They consume everything. Our fleets are broken. Our people are being processed. If there is any mercy left in the galaxy, please help us." Jin and So stared at the message in silence. Then came the coordinates, pointing to a sector of space that human telescopes had barely mapped. The signal included technical data about the attackers' massive mechanical entities that the aliens called Div. "This is real, isn't it?" So whispered. Jin nodded slowly. The data was too detailed, too sophisticated to be fake. Someone out there was dying, and they were asking for help from anyone who might listen. "Look at this," Jin said, pointing to another part of the message. "They're sending this to everyone. It's a broadcast to the entire galaxy." So studied the technical specifications. "Jin, these aliens have technology that makes our best ships look like paper airplanes. If they can't fight these devourers, what chance do we have?" Jin saved all the data to encrypted files. This wasn't a decision for two night shift operators to make. This needed to go straight to Earth's military command as he prepared the urgent transmission to Earth. Jin couldn't shake one thought. Somewhere in the darkness of space, entire civilizations were screaming for help, and somehow that desperate cry had reached two humans drinking coffee on a quiet space station. The war room beneath Seoul was buzzing with tension when Admiral Na walked in. She had called an emergency meeting of Earth's top military leaders, and nobody was happy about being woken up at 3 in the morning. The holographic displays around the circular table showed the alien message that had arrived just hours earlier. General Park was the first to speak, his voice gruff with sleep and annoyance. "Nah, this better be worth dragging us all down here. Some of us have real problems to deal with." Admiral Na didn't waste time with pleasantries. She activated the main display, showing the Zalarian distress signal and all the technical data that came with it. The room went quiet as the military leaders read the translated message. 12 worlds, Na said simply. Billions of lives. And they're asking us for help. Colonel Lee laughed, but there was no humor in it. Help? Look at their technology specs. Their worst ship could destroy our entire fleet without breaking a sweat. What exactly are we supposed to do? Die gloriously, suggested Major Cho from across the table. Because that's all we'd accomplish. Admiral Na had expected this reaction. She pulled up another section of the alien data, one that had caught her attention immediately. Look at this part. The Devourers have conquered dozens of civilizations, all logical, all predictable. But there's a note here about something they call chaotic biological variants. The room leaned forward to read the technical notes. The aliens had mentioned that the Devourers seemed to struggle with species that didn't follow logical patterns. Unfortunately, the Zilurians were extremely logical beings who fought wars like chess matches. They're afraid of chaos. Nah, continued. These machines can predict every move when fighting organized, logical opponents. But what happens when they face something completely unpredictable? General Park frowned. You're talking about us? Exactly. Humans don't fight fair. We don't follow the rules. When we're desperate, we do insane things that no computer could calculate. Colonel Lee shook his head. That's not strategy. Nah, that's suicide with extra steps. But Major Kim, who had been quiet until now, suddenly sat up straight. Wait, remember the war games last year? When Captain Min crashed his fighter into the enemy flagship instead of following retreat protocols. Everyone said he was crazy, but it won the exercise. Because nobody expected it, Admiral Na said, sensing she was winning them over. The enemy computers couldn't factor in someone deliberately destroying himself for a tactical advantage. The room fell silent again. Each leader was thinking about humanity's military history. Every major victory had come from doing something unexpected, something that broke the conventional rules of warfare. The aliens fight like generals, Na said quietly. We fight like desperate humans who refuse to quit. Maybe that's exactly what these Devourers have never faced before. General Park finally nodded. How long do we have? 3 weeks to reach their space. If we're going to help them, we need to leave everything we have. Every ship, every pilot, every crazy human willing to fly into the unknown. The vote was unanimous. Captain Wu had never seen anything like it in his 20 years of service. Every spaceport on Earth and Luna was buzzing with activity as humanity prepared for the impossible. The call had gone out just 12 hours ago, and already volunteers were lining up faster than the recruitment offices could process them. Sir, we've got a problem, Lieutenant Han called out from her station at the Seoul Spaceport Command Center. We have more volunteers than ships. Wu walked over to look at her screen. The numbers were staggering. 40,000 people had volunteered to crew the expedition in just half a day. Retired pilots were coming out of retirement, cargo ship captains were offering their vessels, and even civilian mechanics were signing up to keep the fleet running. What about the ships themselves? Wu asked. 847 confirmed, Han replied. Everything from the big military dreadnoughts down to converted mining ships. Captain Yu is even bringing his old passenger liner. Says it can carry extra supplies and medical equipment. Wu shook his head in amazement. The Earth Defense Force only had about 200 proper military vessels. The rest would be a wild mix of cargo haulers, research ships, mining vessels, and anything else that could mount a weapon and survive in deep space. At the Luna shipyards, Chief Engineer Ko was working miracles. She had teams of workers welding missile pods onto cargo ships and installing military-grade shields on civilian vessels. The modifications were rough, but they didn't need to be pretty. They just needed to work long enough to reach Zilarian space. Ko, how are we doing on the timeline? Wu asked over the communication link. Barely keeping up, Ko replied, sweat dripping from her forehead. But we'll make it. Half these ships won't look like much, but they'll fight. The civilian captains are more excited than scared, if you can believe that. That was the part that amazed Wu the most. When word had gotten out about the alien distress call, humans hadn't panicked or hidden. They had volunteered to fly across the galaxy to help complete strangers. It was either the bravest or most foolish thing humanity had ever attempted. By the end of the week, the Armada was ready. The ships looked like a patchwork fleet from a dozen different eras. Ancient cargo vessels flew alongside cutting-edge military destroyers. Research ships carried experimental weapons that had never been tested in battle. Mining vessels had been converted into missile platforms with more firepower than armor. Captain Wu stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the assembled fleet. 847 ships, each one crewed by humans who had volunteered for what might be a suicide mission. Fleet command to all vessels, Wu announced over the communication system. In 30 minutes, we jump to Zalarian space. We don't know what we'll find there, but we know why we're going. Somewhere out there, people are dying and asking for help. We're going to give them the most human response possible. The fleet jumped together, carrying humanity's chaos into the unknown. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace, expecting to find a war zone. Instead, they found something much worse. Lieutenant So stared at her sensors in horror as thousands of alien ships fled in panic across the star system. Behind them, 3 planets burned with an unnatural light. "My God," whispered Captain Wu from the command chair. "Look at the size of their evacuation fleet." The Zalarian refugee ships were massive, each one carrying what looked like entire cities' worth of survivors. But even from this distance, So could see they were damaged and desperate. Many were leaking atmosphere, their elegant designs scarred by weapons that had torn through their advanced shields like paper. "Sir, I'm getting communication attempts," So reported. "Multiple frequencies, all trying to reach us." "Put them through," Wu ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing a tall, pale alien with large eyes and intricate markings on their forehead. The translation system kicked in, turning their musical language into Korean. "Unknown vessels. You must flee immediately," the alien said, their voice filled with panic. "This system is lost. The Devourers have consumed everything. Your primitive ships cannot help here." Lieutenant So leaned forward. "This is Lieutenant So of the Earth Defense Force. We received your distress signal. We came to help." The alien's expression changed to something that might have been confusion mixed with pity. "Earth, the young species from the outer rim. You should not have come. Our weapons, our shields, our calculations, nothing works against them. Your ships will be processed in moments." Before So could respond, alarms started screaming throughout the human fleet. 3 Devourer probes had appeared, sleek metal shapes that moved with perfect precision toward the nearest human ships. "Contact," shouted Ensign Min from the tactical station. 3 enemy units approaching Scouts Alpha and Beta. What happened next would be talked about in both human and alien circles for generations. Instead of following standard military protocol, the 2 human scout ships did something completely insane. They accelerated directly toward the Devourer probes at full speed. The first scout, piloted by Captain Zhang, opened all his airlocks as he approached the enemy probe. The explosive decompression turned his ship into a massive shotgun blast of debris and atmosphere. The Devourer probe, designed to analyze and counter-organized attacks, had no response programmed for a ship deliberately destroying itself in such a chaotic way. The second scout went even further. Lieutenant Park aimed his ship directly at the probe's center and activated his self-destruct sequence while still inside ramming distance. The explosion consumed both ships, but it also revealed something important. The Devourer probe had actually paused for 3 seconds before the impact, as if trying to calculate what was happening. On the Zalarian command ship, the alien commander stared at his screens in shock. They had destroyed themselves, but the probe stopped functioning. The Devourers paused. "In 300 years of war, we have never seen them hesitate." Lieutenant So opened communications again. "We're not like other species," she said simply. "We don't fight the way you expect, and apparently, neither do your enemies know what to do with that." The first seeds of hope began growing in alien hearts. Major Han had been studying the enemy for 2 days straight, and what he discovered made his blood run cold. The Devourers weren't just advanced machines, they were perfect predictors. Every move the Zalarian fleets had made over the past year had been calculated and countered before it even happened. Look at this data, Han told his crew aboard the destroyer Soul's Pride. The aliens tried flanking maneuvers, concentrated fire, even retreat patterns. Every single strategy was anticipated and destroyed. Ensign Park looked up from her station. So how do we fight something that knows what we're going to do before we do it? Han was studying the battle recordings when something caught his attention. In every engagement, the Devourers had responded to Zalarian moves within milliseconds. But in the earlier probe encounter, there had been those 3-second pauses when human ships had done something completely irrational. They're running calculations, Han realized suddenly. They see an action starting and immediately compute the most logical outcome. But what happens when there is no logical outcome? Before anyone could ask what he meant, the main Devourer fleet appeared. 12 massive ships, each one the size of a small moon, emerged from hyperspace. The Zalarian survivors immediately began their retreat protocols, organized, efficient, logical. The Devourers responded instantly, moving to cut off escape routes with mathematical precision. It was like watching a chess master play against children. Sir, Admiral Na is ordering all ships to fall back, reported Communications Officer Lee. But Han was staring at the tactical display, his mind racing. The Devourers had positioned themselves perfectly to destroy the fleeing alien ships. Every possible escape vector was covered. It was logical, efficient, and completely predictable. Lee, get me a direct line to Admiral Na, Han ordered. Major, you're breaking formation, Lee warned. That's the point, Han replied. He turned his destroyer away from the retreat route and aimed it directly at the largest Devourer ship. Admiral, I need you to record everything that happens in the next 60 seconds. Han, what are you doing? Na's voice crackled over the comm. Testing a theory, Han said calmly. He pushed the engines to maximum power and disabled all safety protocols. Tell my family I love them. The Soul's Pride accelerated toward the Devourer flagship like a missile. But Han wasn't aiming for a critical system or trying to find a weak point. He was aiming for the exact center of the enemy ship, where the collision would do the least. Tactical damage. The Devourer ship could have easily destroyed the destroyer or moved out of the way. Instead, it did something unprecedented. It hesitated. For 7 full seconds, the massive machine intelligence tried to calculate why a human would sacrifice a valuable ship for seemingly no strategic gain. The collision was spectacular. The destroyer was vaporized instantly, barely scratching the enemy's hull. But in that 7-second hesitation, every Zalarian ship in the system escaped. Back on the human flagship, Admiral Na stared at the recordings. They couldn't understand why he did it, she whispered. They can calculate every logical move, but they can't process sacrifice without purpose. The war had just changed completely. Admiral Na stood on her command bridge, watching the massive Devourer fleet arrange itself in perfect formation. The enemy ships moved like clockwork, positioning themselves to create overlapping fields of fire and eliminate any logical attack vectors. It was beautiful, precise, and exactly what Na had hoped for. All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Na, she announced over the communication system. Forget everything you learned in military academy. Today we fight like our ancestors. The human fleet, which had been flying in standard formation, suddenly exploded into chaos. Captain Kim took his squadron and began using tactics from ancient Korean naval battles, approaching the enemy in unpredictable zigzag patterns while his crews shouted traditional war songs. His ships moved like they were fighting in Earth's oceans instead of deep space. On the other side of the battlefield, Colonel Yoon was leading her attack group using strategies from medieval land warfare. Her ships charged in loose formations, breaking off randomly to attack different targets. She had studied old Viking raids and was applying the same unpredictable hit-and-run tactics that had terrorized Europe 1,000 years ago. The immediately tried to calculate responses to these attacks, but something was going wrong with their systems. The human tactics made no sense from a military standpoint. Ships were wasting fuel on unnecessary maneuvers, exposing themselves to enemy fire, and attacking targets that had no strategic value. "Why are they attacking our communication arrays instead of our weapons?" asked the Zalarian observer on Na's bridge. "Because that's what ancient Earth pirates used to do," Na replied with a grin. "They'd cut off enemy communications first, not because it was tactically sound, but because it scared their victims." Captain Cho was having the time of his life leading a group of converted cargo ships in what he called a Mongol charge. His ship spread out in a wide line and attacked from 12 different directions simultaneously, screaming battle cries in Korean, Mongolian, and half a dozen other Earth languages. The Devourers' response time began increasing. Where they had once reacted in milliseconds, now they were taking 3, 4, even 5 seconds to respond to human actions. Their perfect calculations were being overwhelmed by pure chaos. Lieutenant Min's fighter squadron was using tactics from World War II dogfights, complete with radio chatter full of slang and jokes that made no tactical sense. The Devourer interceptors kept trying to predict their movements based on optimal flight paths, but the humans were flying like they were drunk. "Sir, the enemy formation is breaking apart," reported Tactical Officer SEO. "They're starting to react to individual threats instead of coordinating their response." Admiral Na nodded with satisfaction. "They're thinking like humans now, reacting emotionally instead of logically. And machines that think emotionally make mistakes." The perfect Devourer fleet was slowly dissolving into confusion as 8 human ships attacked using tactics from every period of Earth's violent history. For the first time in centuries, the machines were learning what it felt like to be afraid. Captain Me was elbowed deep in the guts of a Zalarian medical scanner when the idea hit her. The alien device was designed to analyze biological tissue at the molecular level, but Me realized it could do something else entirely. If she reversed the scanning beam and overloaded the power core, it would become the perfect weapon against machines. "Park, get over here," Me called to her chief engineer. "We're about to turn this medical bay into an armory." The battle had been raging for 6 hours, and the human fleet was doing something that amazed even themselves. They were adapting faster than the Devourers could calculate responses. Every time the enemy machines figured out one human tactic, the humans had already moved on to something completely different. "Captain, this is insane," Park said, looking at Me's improvised weapon design. "You want to turn medical equipment into a molecular disruptor. Why not?" Me grinned, her hands already working to rewire the alien technology. "The Zalarians used this to heal people. We're going to use it to give the Devourers a very thorough examination." Across the fleet, similar scenes were playing out. "Commander?" Shin had discovered that Zalarian food processors could be modified to create clouds of metallic particles that confused enemy sensors. Captain Bay was using gravity manipulation tools from alien mining equipment to create artificial black holes that lasted just long enough to trap enemy fighters. But the most spectacular adaptation was happening aboard the cargo vessel Busan Express *. Captain Ju had stripped out all the cargo containers and filled his ship with construction materials from a Zalarian building project. Now, he was using his entire vessel as a kinetic missile, but with a twist. "Engineering to bridge," called Chief Lee over the com. "The modifications are complete. We can eject cargo pods at near light speed." Ju smiled as he watched a Devourer cruiser approaching his position. The enemy ship was calculating the threat level of a simple cargo vessel and determining it to be minimal. They had no idea what was coming. "Fire everything," Ju ordered. The Busan Express became a massive shotgun, launching thousands of construction materials at incredible speeds. Alien building blocks, support beams, and even decorative sculptures turned into devastating projectiles. The Devourer ship's shields were designed to stop organized weapons fire, not a chaotic storm of random construction debris. Back on Captain Mi's ship, her improvised medical weapon was working perfectly. The molecular scanner was tearing apart enemy fighter hulls at the atomic level, and the Devourers had no idea how to counter it because they had never seen anyone weaponize healing equipment. "Captain, we're getting reports from across the fleet," reported Communications Officer Ko. "Everyone's making their own weapons from salvaged alien tech. The enemy response time is now averaging 12 seconds per engagement." Mi nodded with satisfaction. 12 seconds might not sound like much, but in space combat, it was an eternity. The Devourers were designed to fight predictable enemies with standard weapons. They had never faced a species that could turn medical equipment into weapons and cargo, ships into artillery platforms in the middle of battle. Humanity was showing the galaxy what evolution in real time looked like. Admiral Na stared at the tactical display, her heart pounding as the pieces finally came together. For hours, her analysis team had been tracking the Devourer communication patterns, and now they had found it, the central node controlling the entire machine fleet. It was massive, hidden behind layers of smaller ships, but it was there. "Lieutenant Choi, how much cultural data do we have in our archives?" Na asked suddenly. "Sir." Choi looked confused. "Everything from Earth's databases, music, art, literature, historical records. Why do you ask?" Na was already moving toward the helm, her decision made. "Because we're about to give these machines the most human gift of all, complete confusion." The flagship Inchin began accelerating toward the center of the Devourer formation. The enemy ships immediately started calculating intercept courses, but Na wasn't trying to avoid them. She was heading straight through their lines toward the central node. "Admiral, what are you doing?" Captain Song called from the navigation station. "Something no computer could ever predict," Na replied, her hands flying over the communication controls. "I'm going to crash this ship into their central brain and upload every contradiction humanity has ever created." The crew stared at her, in shock, but Na was already broadcasting. She started with Korean folk songs, their ancient melodies mixing pain and joy in ways that defied logic. Then came classical music from around the world, Beethoven's symphonies that somehow made sadness beautiful, jazz that broke every rule of harmony, and punk rock that turned noise into art. The Devourer ships began responding erratically. Their perfect formations started wavering as the central node tried to process what it was receiving. Music that expressed opposite emotions simultaneously was something their logical systems couldn't categorize. "Adding poetry archives," Na announced, uploading thousands of years of human verse, love poems that celebrated both happiness and heartbreak, war poetry that glorified and condemned conflict in the same breath, and philosophical works that asked questions with no logical answers. Lieutenant Choi was crying now, watching her admiral's sacrifice unfold. "Sir, the enemy ships are slowing down. Their communication patterns are breaking apart." Na smiled as her ship punched through the final line of Devourer defenders. The central node was directly ahead, a geometric masterpiece of logical design. In 30 seconds, it would be gone. "Final upload," Na said quietly, broadcasting humanity's greatest contradictions. Art that found beauty in destruction, stories about heroes who won by losing, and the simple human truth that sometimes the most logical thing to do was something completely illogical. The Devourer central node tried desperately to process the cultural data. How could beings create music about sadness that made them happy? How could they write poetry celebrating the beauty of things that would destroy them? How could they find meaning in meaninglessness? The collision lasted only seconds, but the cultural upload continued transmitting across the entire Devourer network. Millions of logical minds suddenly faced the impossible task of understanding humanity. And one by one, they simply stopped trying. The silence was the strangest part. After hours of explosions, laser fire, and the screaming of twisted metal, the battlefield suddenly went quiet. Captain Rue floated in his damaged fighter, staring at something that should have been impossible. The Devourer ships had simply stopped moving. Not destroyed, not damaged, just stopped. The massive machine vessels hung in space like giant metal statues, their weapons powered down, their engines silent. Some were still sparking from battle damage, but they weren't fighting anymore. They weren't doing anything at all. "Control, this is Captain Rue," he radioed to the surviving human fleet. "The enemy ships are— I don't know how to describe this. They're just floating there." Across the system, similar reports were coming in. The Devourers weren't responding to attacks, weren't trying to escape, weren't even defending themselves. They had become the galaxy's most expensive space debris. On the Zalarian command ship, Engineer Veltar was frantically scanning the machine vessels. "Commander, their central processing networks are still active, but they're not executing any commands. It's like they're thinking about something so complex that they can't focus on anything else." Commander Lin stood beside the alien engineer, trying to understand what had happened. Admiral Na's cultural upload is still transmitting across their network. Every Devourer ship is trying to process human art, music, and poetry simultaneously. "How is that possible?" Veltar asked. Lin shrugged. "Have you ever tried to understand why humans make sad music when they're happy, or why they write love songs about people who left them? Now imagine trying to calculate the logical purpose of that behavior." The rescue operations took 3 days. Human ships moved carefully through the silent Devourer fleet, searching for survivors and salvaging what they could. The machines never responded, never moved, never showed any sign that they noticed the humans crawling over their hulls. When the surviving Zalarian leaders finally met with the human commanders, the atmosphere was strange. There was gratitude. Certainly humanity had saved billions of lives. But there was also something that looked a lot like fear. "You must understand," said High Counselor Zethrin, his elegant alien features showing deep concern. "In 300 years of galactic civilization, we have never seen anything like this. You didn't just defeat the Devourers, you broke them with concepts they couldn't understand." Captain Me, the highest-ranking surviving human officer, nodded. Slowly. "We're different, that's all. We don't think the way other species do." "That's exactly what worries us," Zethron replied quietly. Within weeks, the story had spread across the galaxy. Humanity became known as the Chaos Bringers, the species that had ended the Devourer threat, not through superior weapons or tactics, but by being so fundamentally unpredictable that even perfect machines couldn't comprehend them. Some alien species sent ambassadors to Earth, eager to learn from the humans who had saved the galaxy. Others quietly reinforced their borders and hoped the Chaos Bringers would stay in their own corner of space, for humanity. It was perfect. They had earned their place among the stars, not by being the strongest or the smartest, but by being the most human.